So there are many important aspects when it comes to terminal tackle, but for me, the most important is the rig mechanics. If you haven't got a rig that's fishing and presented, you're not going to get a bite. And that can mean anything from a lead setup to hook size and even to the length of your rig. So there's a few certain steps to ensure that I convert more pickups into takes. Being presented is obviously the key element, and every time you go fishing you're faced with different scenarios with different lake beds. You can be fishing on a soft bottom such as weed and sill, or you'll be fishing on a hard bottom such as gravel and clay. And there's two simple rules I follow when fishing these types of lake beds. Firstly, if fishing over a soft bottom such as weed or sill, I like to opt for a helicopter setup with a slightly longer rig with a pop-up, or if the weed is really that bad, I like to use a choddy. If I'm fishing a real nice hard firm bottom, nice and clean, I like to use a real heavy lead, the heaviest I can get away with. Sometimes maybe 5-6 ounces if I'm dropping in the edge or from a boat, and I like to use the shortest rig I can and always fish a bait on the deck. So when fishing over a soft bottom, basic rule of thumb, if I'm fishing over silt, I'll always fish my top bead around 6 to 8 inches above the lead, or if I'm fishing in weed, I like to move that up to at least a foot, maybe even sometimes 2 foot. And for example, if I'm using a choddy in weed, like really dense weed or really thick weed such as Canadian, the lead's going all the way through the weed and the rig's going to be sitting up nice and high, so sometimes that bead is sort of 6 foot away from the lead to ensure I'm presented at all times. The length of the rig sort of depends again on the depth of the weed or the silt. If I'm fishing on silt, I think you can get away with a conventional rig such as a gyro or something like that, and I always sort of start the rig off around 10 inches, use a nice soft coated braid to ensure it's just going to follow the weed. But as I say, if it is really weedy, I'd always opt for a choddy. So when fishing on a hard bottom, this is definitely a preferred method of mine because it enables me to use a real heavy lead and a nice short hook length. I usually start with around 5 to 6 inches in my hook length, but at times when I've been real confident the spot is really rock hard and real nice clean feeding spot, I've gone down to lengths such as 3 inches, and that really enables the fish to come into contact with the lead quickly. When it comes to hook lengths and fishing over a hard bottom, I'm using a rig such as the gyro. I fish a nice short fluorocarbon boom, or if I'm not using a rig that has the use of a swivel, I'll use the stiff coated skin link and I'll just strip a small piece back behind the eye to enable movement of the hook still. When it comes to lead arrangement, I know it's not one of the most popular factors in carp fishing, but I have to get rid of the lead. I want it gone. As soon as I've picked up the rod and I'm in direct contact with the fish, I don't want there to be anything in between me and the fish that can potentially snag up on weed or in the snags, or if it can cause the carp to get tethered. You know, I want that lead gone. I need direct contact with the fish, and also think having a big lead hanging on the end such as a 3-4 ounce, it can tamper with the hook holds, leading to hook pulls. Yeah, whenever you can get rid of the lead, make sure you do. The lead arrangements I use to ensure that I drop the lead every time is a weed lead clip or a drop off inline. If I'm zig fishing, I'll always opt for a lead clip. If I am fishing on the deck over a real nice hard bottom, I'll always opt for a drop off inline. A key factor for me is always ensuring that rig resets itself. You know, sometimes my rods are in the water for 24-48 hours, and to know and be confident in my head that my rig's fishing that whole time is key. And the two things I do to ensure this always happens is I use a critically balanced bait, whether that be a wafter or a pop-up, and I use a stiffer hook because I can get away with. There's so many lakes now that have nuisance fish or crayfish, and I think your rig's getting picked up a lot of the time, even by coots, you know. But I know in my head that rig has fallen back down and it's just kicked itself out nice and neatly again and it's fishing. When it comes to hook holds, I'm aiming to hook the carp in the bottom lip. I don't just want it at the front, I want it 2 inches back, buried right round to the bend of the hook. If you hook a carp there, it's never going to come off. Although 2 inches back in the bottom lip is the perfect hook hold, you're not going to get that every time, you know. But every time I catch a carp, I always check where it's hooked. If it's hooked in the scissors or maybe not as far back as I'd like, you need to make those micro rig adjustments, whether that be lengthen the rig, shorten the rig, or even change your hook bait. There's certain adjustments you can make. It's just a case of trial and error throughout your session. Keep checking your hook holds so you can make them adjustments to ensure you're going to get that perfect hook hold as much as you possibly can. There's so many variables that come into play that are just simply out of your control when it comes to getting that perfect hook hold. That could be anything from the fish not feeding as confidently as you'd like them to, they're not in a group, they're not competing for the food, or their approach the rig from a funny angle, or just a simple case of a fish with mouth damage. You know, a fish with mouth damage, you're not going to hook it exactly where you want it to. There's 3 things that I do every time I go fishing to ensure that I can turn more pickups into takes. And those 3 things are using the biggest and heaviest lead that I can get away with, the shortest rig that I can get away with, and the biggest and sharpest hook that I can get away with. So first of all, the biggest and heaviest lead that I can get away with. This is just simply down to the fact that with carp fishing, it's so different to other types of fishing, because with those, you're striking to set the hook. In carp fishing, you're relying on that lead to set the hook for you. So using the heaviest lead you can get away with just enables it's going to pull more force on that hook into the fish's mouth and draw it home. And secondly, this goes hand in hand with using a heavy lead. I like to use as stiff and short hook link as I can get away with. Sometimes when using a longer rig, the fish can use that hook link material to its advantage and can sit there on the spot sucking and blowing, and so it can actually eject your hook bait. Whereas if you're using a nice short stiff hook link, it's going to come into contact with that lead straight away, ensuring that hook is driven home. And finally, I like to use as big and as sharp hook as I can get away with. Don't get me wrong, there's certain situations where you can't use a big hook, whether you're surface fishing or zig fishing for an example. But if I'm fishing on the deck, I'll always opt for the biggest hook that I can get away with. And the majority of the time for me in the UK, that's a size 4. I've even had to step up to a size 2 sometimes, especially if I'm snag fishing and I've got to apply that little bit more pressure to the carp when I've hooked it. Always use the biggest hook you can get away with. As well as using the biggest hook I can get away with, I'll always use the sharpest hook I can get away with. I've been sharpening my hooks now for maybe 4 to 5 years, and I'm 100% convinced since I've been doing so, I've turned more pickups into takes. It's just another element you're putting in your favour, you know, you're not striking in carp fishing, so by the use of a heavy lead and a super sharp pinpoint hook, it just enables that hook to pierce through the skin and bury itself where it needs to be. So there you go, there's my take on rig mechanics, and I'm confident that if you implement any of these tips into your fishing, it will help you turn more pickups into takes.